Welcome to Australian Hunger. I am your host, Ben. On today's show, I've got an interview with Laedj, sort of about their EP that they released earlier this year, during the middle of the year, but not really, because the band has kind of moved on since then, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But yeah, so the interview is kind of interesting in that way. So I watched a documentary series called Fighting in the Age of Loneliness by one of the hosts of a podcast I enjoy, Felix Biederman, and a guy, I'm not sure exactly what he does, but John Boyes. It's about MMA, which is interesting because I'm not a fan of MMA. I've never watched it. I don't have any interest in sport generally, and certainly not one in pugilism specifically. But I thought it was really well done, really enjoyed it, gave me a good insight into the sport. But why I'm bringing it up, because it's not at all related to this show, why I'm bringing it up is the final episode finished on a couple of sort of contemplatory notes. One of them was about the influence, you could say, of capitalism, the incorporation into a broader culture, serialization of the rough edges of a particular cultural form in order to give it more broad appeal, all those sorts of things. And it kind of made me reflect a little bit on what heavy metal is, or maybe heavy alternative music more generally. There's two aspects to it. One, heavy metal has had periods where it's attempted to be incorporated into the mainstream culture. And I think a lot of heavy metal fans would say that those have been failures and produced subpar material. You could cite thrash metal, nu metal, all those sorts of things. And I think a broader point, sort of taking off from that, is that these kind of issues where you're trying to figure out what place a subculture has within mainstream culture. My kind of thought is that it's a very true point, and basically the only way that we continue producing material, we as sort of a community of people producing, enjoying this kind of music, is that it cannot be incorporated into mainstream culture. Because that, if it does, it loses all the aspects, or a lot of the aspects that we enjoy, and it becomes sanitized, and it loses its edge. It gains aspects which we don't enjoy. Generally, obviously, there's a lot of diverse opinions, but I'm speaking generally, and possibly, maybe I'm only speaking for myself. What's the consequence of that? That it has to remain a subculture. It has to remain underground in some respects. It has to remain separated from mainstream culture, because its incorporation means that it doesn't represent something that we want it to be. It basically means that we have to suffer for this. And I don't mean that in some sort of theatrical sense. I mean that in the kind of more subtle day-to-day sense. The interview earlier this week was with Adam from Project Heaven Sent, and we talked a little bit about the fact that it's very difficult to get a foothold in the market and get noticed. And that's obviously sort of specific in a certain way to him, because it's a new project. It doesn't have... it hasn't had as much time to gain a fan base. It's a solo project, which means it doesn't have the ability to market itself through events and gigs. But I think this is applicable to a lot of people, just because of the fact that very few musicians within the industry have an ability to make a livelihood from this, except for some of the big ones. Obviously, this is applicable more generally to musicians in general, because there's just it's very difficult at this particular time, and to a certain extent it always has been, to gain a foothold, to break through. But being not able to gain a foothold in that same kind of way, being not able to include those elements that have broad appeal and increase the spread of the people you can target, but increase the number of people you can appeal to. I think that there's like something we kind of have to admit, that like in order for this art form to remain the way we want it to remain, we have to suffer for it. I don't know if that's a controversial point or just banal, but like there is a certain extent to which we have to endure the problems which will pursue us because of the fact that the art form is not broadly marketable. And if we want to keep it that way, we have to like consciously want to suffer in some sort of way. I don't know. That was my kind of thought, that like, I don't know. This may just be me, but I'm always thinking about the fact that it's a good thing that our art form isn't broadly marketable because of the fact that it's good that way, because all the things I've discussed. And maybe we need to more consciously approach the fact that it is difficult because it should be difficult, because if it wasn't difficult, we'd be doing the wrong thing maybe. I don't know. These are the things I've sort of thought about for a while, and I'm kind of still thinking through them. Because in an ideal world, people even making music which is not able to be kind of incorporated into broader culture and can kind of remain itself should still be able to make a living. That'd be the ideal world, but we don't live in that ideal world. We live in the capitalist system, and essentially, if it's not broadly marketable, it's sort of no use in that system. I don't know, these kind of issues I'll probably talk about over the run of the show, and I'm still sort of thinking about that, because I would love it if Adam could just go on and make a living from his music. Because as I mentioned, Project Heaven Sent, possibly one of my favourite albums of the year, and if he could make even more music, I think it'd be better for everyone. But I don't know. Maybe the word suffering's a bit too much, but like that is essentially the consequence of this. And maybe we need to be a bit more explicit about the choice we have. And the choice I feel, and I'm definitely not making it because I'm not a musician, but the choice I feel every musician in this category should probably make. Anyway, Laedj. So I saw them at a show, the Bear the Mammoth show that I went to a few weeks ago, and I thought they were really cool. I'll interview them. And I see that they have an EP released earlier in the year, a little bit further back than usually I do, but yeah, it's no issue to be able to talk about that. And what was kind of interesting to me was like, it didn't seem that the songs bore any specific relation to the songs that they played at the gig. And well, that'd be something we talk about. And you know, we talked about it, and you'll hear in the interview. And I was thinking like, the songs don't actually have kind of as tangible connection to the band they are at the moment. I don't know what I'm going to do. Obviously, I can just play them, but that's not really the ideal situation. And what happened is they said, "Hey, we actually recorded the show that we did with Bear the Mammoth. Here's a couple of tracks you want to play." I'm like, yes, that'd be fucking amazing to play those live tracks which are representative of the band you are now during the interview. It's perfect, and I really appreciate them sending them through, and I hope you really enjoy it. The first one is called Monda. The second one, the one at the end, is a live version of an EP, Bug in the Mainframe. But obviously, you'll hear in the interview that they sort of go about changing the songs in certain ways, so intentionally and unintentionally. But yeah, those are songs. The interview with Laedj, the EP is out, but I'm really looking forward to them producing some new music, which is more representative of the band they are now. So this is Nathan and Mathias from Laedj. Normally I don't have to kind of like ask this question because, like, you know, a band is a band is a band to a certain extent. But you guys sort of seem a little bit more interesting than that. Can you tell us a bit about like how the band actually functions?
Well, so it's changed a lot in, I guess it's only maybe almost 3 years of being a band. And it sort of started as a solo recording project of mine, and then it transformed into a band where we kind of worked on songs, and now it's got to a point where we try just to improv, kind of where we'll like jam, have an improv jam, and then when we play live, we're just trying to recreate a vibe that we vibed on at a rehearsal. And then I guess, I don't know, kind of the scary, like, it's fun to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation of being like, we don't know what's going to happen, but it'll be fun anyway. So I think that's kind of the idea of it now, is to just do something different and think on the spot.
No, that's really interesting. Like, how did the band start with you?
So I've always played in bands, mostly as a drummer, actually, which was my first instrument. And then I got into guitar and keyboards a bit later on. And then it just always played in sort of other people's bands as occasionally I'd bring something to the table, but then I just started recording some songs for the first time and had no intention of really ever kind of fronting a band. And then it just kind of happened because kept on playing in bands where people wouldn't show up to band practices or stuff. And then so Nathan and Nick, another original member, we were playing in another band and no one else turned up to band practice. So we just started playing my songs and then just thought we'd keep doing that, I guess.
That's really interesting. The name, Laedj, where does that come from?
That is probably the most significant but also insignificant part of the whole journey, in the sense that Laedj doesn't mean anything. It never has. It originally started out as looking nice in a text format where we had an L and a J and in a nice font where the L and the J would line up together. And then we decided, call it something, and it was going to be Laedj, I think, for a while there. And then we realized that sounded terrible. And we were, how about we throw an E in there as well? And we ended up with Laedj, which has had many reiterations on radio shows called, what we called the LADJs or Laedj or I don't know, whatever, however you want to say it. But it's always a point of interest with people in terms of
it's more just the visual aspect, I think.
Yeah.
But as soon as it's put into like capital letters, it doesn't look the same anyway. So it's a stupid name, but it's too late.
It has no meaning, and we made it, and now we're stuck with it. So that's the long and short of that.
So the band sort of broadening out to kind of what it is. What's the process that's sort of taken?
Well, I think now what everyone listens to now and what you can hear from Laedj that is available is sort of one of the early iterations of the band. The EP itself that we have now is for us about 2 or 3 years old. In terms of the songs and the structure. But it was a labor of love, and we sort of built this EP/album around the idea of it being a cinematic experience, where if you listen to it from stop to start, it never ends. There's no silence in our EP, and then matching it with the visuals that we have in the video that we created, it kind of became a soundtrack for a visual repertoire of songs. But now that's morphed into more of going down the instrumental route, because we kind of realized we're not the greatest singers in the world. And so for us now, it's more about creating, a space that people can get into, a headspace people can get into where they bop along, tap their feet, and sort of get transported into that kind of ethereal place where you just find yourself bopping along. And that's what it's turned into now, from being a band that writes songs into a band that doesn't write anything, which is kind of fun in its own way.
There were a couple of individual songs released in 2017. How do they fit sort of into like what the band was doing? Were they sort of intended to be part of a wider release, or were you just kind of putting stuff out there?
So I think the first song we put out was
Pacific,
and that was the first song we'd sort of written as a band, and in the after it had been my solo thing, and then we sort of found members and kind of were like, let's be a band. That was the first song we put out that we'd written together. And then we put out a song called Carpal Tunnel, which was actually the very first song that I ever recorded on my own and wrote and sang on. And that was recorded in about 2014 or 2015. So it sat around for a long time, and then I think we tried to re-record it, and it just the original sounded better, so we just sort of spruced it up a bit, I guess, and then put that out. But yeah, I think they were initially put out as sort of to be a lead up for an EP or an album, but then when we got round to piecing the album together, those songs didn't really fit. So that's kind of how the album became an EP, because we just dropped off the songs that had already been released.
Yeah, we've always been a band that, and still now, we have no rhyme or reason or methodology to what we do or what we release. It's just kind of, we'll create something, we happen to record it, we get it fixed up, and then we go, you know what, let's drop this now. And that's the same thing that happened with the singles and even the EP. It just took a fair bit longer.
Now, one thing that was kind of noticeable, and maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't really apply anymore because there's not necessarily a chronology to the releases, but like the first two songs gave off very like shoegaze, alternate. Your post-punk vibe. The third one was a little bit more experimental, and then the album was the EP was much more experimental.
Yeah, it definitely. So when we first, basically, I think of Laedj as kind of having three different eras, I guess, so far, and that the first era was definitely like I was kind of going to the shoegaze thing, but originally I was like, I wanted to be a shoegaze band with Beach Boys vocals or something, and then very quickly we realized we weren't the Beach Boys and we'll never be the Beach Boys. So then that sort of like, I guess we ended up a bit more post-punky, kind of a little bit more aggressive and punky, but trying to be dancey. And still,
it kind of morphed from this idea to write shoegazy songs with a bit of a dreamy vocal, washed out, kind of vocal vibe, and then we found ourselves, I don't know, getting lost in jams that we would just repeat and find really good pieces of, and then those jams made their way into the sets, and progressively our live set would turn from a set of songs into 3 or 4 songs with a jam, and then over time now, including the EP and not including, we have ended up in this space where we don't really do songs anymore. So it's kind of morphed from the idea of creating songs to a structure with an idea behind them, more into just this ethereal kind of find a vibe and stick with it. But it's kind of, that's our chronology, I guess, is you can hear that evolution, and the live version of us now is kind of the final evolution.
I think it's just sort of the natural evolution of us trying to find our sound, because even in the like earlier days, we jam, and I feel like the best ideas were when we would jam them, but then if we spent too long trying to really, I don't know, like perfect them, they'd lose their they're like this, the special, I guess,
spark behind it would disappear whilst we're trying to focus too heavily on songwriting.
So with the EP, when do you start working on that?
Well, there's, I think, one song on it which was still a song just recorded, just me on my own, and that would have been about 2015. So I'd say it was about 2015 to it took about 3 years.
Yeah, I guess it's been a culmination of finding the songs that we wrote when they were songs, then melding it with the new iteration of what the band had become, with instrumentalized versions, which you can sort of hear the EP skips from. There's no vocals for the first, I think, 12 and a half minutes. If that's a way to exemplify how we do things. Not an afterthought, but they're not the focus for us. So it's always been a creation of the sound and then layering things on top of that. But in terms of this EP, yeah, it'd be 3 years solid of, the first songs we've had them for 3 years, and then the last songs we might have only had for 12 months. But yeah, it's been just sort of a piecing together of that.
No, that's really interesting. So it's it's really a representative of a lot of periods of the band. So, all right. So let's sort of transition away from that EP. So you sort of finished that in 2017. All right. So the EP's finished. What happens after that? Were you already sort of considering, hey, this kind of songwriting, this kind of very samey kind of way we're doing stuff in terms of writing a song and then recording it isn't working for us, or was it after the EP that kind of transition occurred?
So what I think happened, so I played in another band called Breathe, and we played a bunch of shows in Europe in 2016, and I think I'd seen a bunch of bands and played with a bunch of bands on that tour that sort of inspired me to think a little bit different as well. And then I came back and we sort of finished the EP, and then before we released the EP, our guitarist went overseas for 6 months, and it sort of halted everything, and we sort of thought the band was done, kind of thing. And me and Nathan started another band. And then when Liam got back, I think we just had some jams just for fun, and then kind of realized that if we didn't take it so seriously and spend so long and I guess like try perfect everything, if we just kept it fresh for us, it would be sort of more enjoyable and we'd get more from it. So I kind of think that was how we ended up to this new way of doing things. But we still hadn't put the EP out at that point. So putting the EP out was sort of, we wanted to get it out because we spent so long on it. But it was
definitely a selfish, like, personal sort of thing for us to sort of, I guess, as you said earlier, to tell our chronology of how we've progressed as a band. And we never really had an intent of releasing it as it is, but it just sort of came together in the months after we got back together as a band. And it went from 0 to 100 real quick. And it just happened to fall together into place as neatly as it did. I don't know. It's a very weird story for us to tell because there's no, like I said before, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just sort of happened. I wish there was a better story to tell. So I don't know, but basically what we've released now, as for most people and anyone who listens to it, it sort of would definitely clash with whatever they saw or heard now if they were to come to a show. But yeah, it's still in the same theme and same vibe of what we've always done. But yeah, I don't know.
I think the biggest change was both Liam and I would both play guitar and both play keyboards, and we'd sort of switch out. And then when Liam came back, we just decided that I would just play keyboards and he would just play guitar, as just a sort of way to simplify a live show. And then out of that simplification was kind of, I guess, like limiting ourselves to just playing one instrument each. It, I guess, opened up something else, and like it opened up a new way of writing music or jamming music. Because I'm not trained on keyboards at all, which is why I really enjoy playing them in a band, because it's not an instrument I'm comfortable on. But
I think that's probably a good way to define, is that now we've progressed to a space where we enjoy being uncomfortable.
Yes.
So it went from a headspace where we wanted to construct something that we thought would be palatable, versus now just trying to find that space where we're uncomfortable and nervous and scared. And that's where we are now. It's a great space to be in whenever you jump up on stage and you're not sure what's going to happen. So it went from a place of trying to find something that we could essentially sell to people's ears, and now it's more of a, let's see what happens.
So the reason I'm interviewing you guys is because I went to see Bear the Mammoth, who I also interviewed a few weeks ago, and you're one of the support acts, and I'm like, all right, cool, 4 guys up there, they're doing their thing. I look at your Facebook page, the band has 7 members or something. What's going on? What's going on there?
So that's pretty much everyone that's ever been involved in the band. So originally it was a 5-piece band with 3 guitars. We lost 2 members, and then that's when Liam joined on. So it became a 4-piece with me and Liam both playing 2 instruments. And then we've also got Ryan, who he is
an unofficial member.
He doesn't play live with us, but we do all our recordings with him. And I guess he co-produces it with me in the way that I pretty much, if I'm ever doing anything musical, I always work with Ryan because I trust his ears 100%.
That's Ryan Fallis at Invention Studios. Check it out.
So
Shout out.
He also worked on the new Alithia album as well,
whom you interviewed recently as well, which is But I think there's an element of that. The naming of all the different people on the Facebook page is kind of it's on the EP as well. We name everyone involved, and I think that's sort of a throwback to everything that we've released and everything that we play still has attached to it the tethers of the members who may not be there anymore. So for us, it's sort of, it may only be the 4 of us now, but the songs that we're playing have got the flavors of all the different past and present members attached to it.
Yes.
Let's sort of run through like what the band is at the moment. So what does, in like a very general sense, what does the band do?
Yeah, that's hard, isn't it? The band now subsists basically on a basis of going into a room together. We find a pattern that we all vibe with.
Yeah, usually it might start with at home, just on my own, I might just play around with drone sounds or samples of just field recordings and that sort of thing. So now we'll sort of, I guess I'll bring a sample of whatever to the band, and it'll sort of set a vibe, and then from that we sort of just try feel something out. So pretty much every song will just start with sort of like a droning sound, and everyone gets into key, and then
a good way to exemplify it is now that so for example, at the moment, just today even, we've got sort of 20 minutes worth of jams that we've recorded just at rehearsals where we have no structure, no idea what they're doing, but we've just spent, we're one of those bands that will spend 20, 30 minutes playing one groove and trying to find out where it leads. So that's what Laedj is now. Essentially, we're looking for a space where everybody links together and then fleshes it out and opens it up to be something more exciting than what we started with. But there's no structure, there's no process, there's no, I guess, song. Not anymore. There used to be, but less now is a songwriter bringing in a song, and then we try and build it from that. Now it's just it can be something as simple as a single note on a synthesizer that turns into a fully fleshed song, as opposed to being someone coming in with a riff. So that's kind of what it is now. Yeah, that's what Laedj does.
Now, to what ends though? So, obviously, you play live. You obviously are trying to generate material which you can play live. But is there any intention to continue making actual music that's recorded, or is that sort of besides the point?
No, definitely. So, I think the plan is that now when we go record, we're going to go find like an interesting place to record, and we're gonna jam. We're just gonna jam, and we might jam the same song 5 or 6 times until we really lock into something, and then I guess piecing it together into an album will be something we do after it's recorded. And yeah, I think that's the plan. Is we're just gonna record our jams and then just hope it's good. But I kind of like it being warts and all. If there's a few bung notes or whatever, I'm okay with that. I don't want to be too precious about it, because I think it's just about finding a vibe.
Yeah, and it sounds cliche, but it's kind of like trying to take the elements of the space that you're in at the time, which is why whenever we do anything now, we really try to look for avenues or venues that put us outside of our comfort zone, because we definitely have one, and we like to take those influences from those spaces and places that weird us out a little bit and turn that into something. So just for an example, our most upcoming attempt at recording something will probably be in, I don't know, a cathedral, where we just start with a singular note and jam on that for as long as we possibly can and see what comes out of it. So there's definitely a plan to make more music and release more music, but for us, it's never been about a time span or how quickly we can do something. It's been more about just finding what feels right, what sounds good, and what we really enjoy doing, as opposed to trying to structure something for people to listen to. And that sounds bad, but that's not what it's about. It's more about, it is a selfish endeavor. But yeah, we're looking to just, I don't know, create a space that we enjoy it and we can all express ourselves with our instruments in that setting.
And so you're jamming, you found a good vibe. What relation does that have to, for example, the show you put on with Bear the Mammoth?
So I think basically again is we'd just try recreate that vibe that we found when we were initially jamming that piece of music. We might just start, it'll be the same bass line and the same drum beat to get going, and then once we're sort of a bit like pumped up and starting to enjoy it, it'll start taking its own shape live. And I think that's the exciting thing, is that even if we play a song that's recorded, is the live version of it will be a new experience again, because it's always going to be fresh and it's always going to evolve. And I think that's the exciting thing about playing live, is to just let something,
Yeah, you kind of let things go.
You let the song write itself rather than like trying to learn it exactly as it was recorded. And I think that goes the same as how we've always worked as a band, is even songs on the EP will be slightly different when we've played them live. But I think it's just sort of letting go of a structure of a song and just, doing what feels good at the time. Or
when we play live now, like we said, we're trying to find a vibe, and that's a very vague way to describe what we're doing. And what we're trying to do is translate the feeling we get when we're locked into something that we find exciting, and hopefully get the audience and the people listening involved in that. And to go along with us on this weird journey, and hopefully it doesn't turn out terrible.
I think that's part of the attraction of it as well, is that we might be trying to like vibe on this idea, and the crowd might just be standing there looking at us like we're aliens or something. But I think that will go and translate across in the music as well. And so, or if people are really, really enjoying it, I think that it's also going to start translating across in that particular version of that song on that one occasion. So I guess it's like trying to share an experience with people there in the room,
who
you've never met, and take away from them just as much as you're giving back to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to.
One thing that kind of interests me about that kind of approach, where every live show is, in a sense, a unique experience, is, and perhaps this speaks to my kind of nature as a person who likes to catalogue and collect things and have them remain in their places, is that like it's sort of experience which is there and it dissipates and it's lost. How do you feel about that kind of aspect of it?
Well, if it was in an ideal world, we'd record every live show that we had so that we could, then look back and find those elements of that show that turned into something enjoyable for not just us, but for everyone there as well. And we did do that with the Bear the Mammoth show that you were at. We recorded that live, and it's always interesting because I guess it's strange when we play these songs being a loose word, when we play these structures that we have a rough idea of, we never know how it's going to turn out. And most of the time after we finish, we don't remember what happened, how it went, or how it necessarily sounded. And for us recording that particular, it was an affirmation of that idea that we thought, yes, it's interesting and it's different, but it worked. And it's been a fuel for us now to listen back to what we do in these random iterations of the band and try and push forward with it, because it seems to be something that we all enjoy and other people get into as well. And it's definitely a very niche idea, but at the same time, it's something that I think we're all very passionate about, is to drift into the unknown with every show, and then hope that when we get off stage, people sort of give you the handshake and say that was good. It's always on a hope and a prayer.
With you guys kind of experimenting, jamming, like how do you go about finding something that has a good vibe? Like, how do you know what that is? How do you go about finding it?
I think so I'll get inspiration from even watching a movie or something like that. Like, it might even just be like a monologue, or in a movie, someone talking, and I think, oh, well, that was I really enjoyed just that. I guess that context or something. And so all things from movies or TV or anything like that, which just, I guess it's just bits of things that sort of, I guess, I don't know, trigger something in me, or just a little bit of inspiration from something. It might be from pictures as well, which I think, I don't know. I think there's even an idea of me is in the future that we try do live improvised jams to a silent movie and just try actually vibe off the movie that's in front of us, and use that as inspiration. So I think it could just be from anything. It can be from coming home from a bad day at work and then, I don't know, making a guitar feedback and then being like, oh yeah, I like the sound of that, and I'll record it. And then
there's still a not a structure, but a sort of a process that involves creating something from those experiences, and it will usually entail, to be a bit more cliche, Mathias might come in and create a synth loop that is based off what he's felt and created, and then I'll start playing a drum beat to it, and then our bassist will start playing bass to it, and then we color it with guitars and samples and stuff like that. So there's still a fundamental songwriting process there, but it's not in any way structured or, I guess, critiqued. It's kind of just everyone, it builds itself, and then we find the best version of that. And it takes a long time, a lot of the time. But that's what's enjoyable about it, is sitting in a space and getting sweaty for 3 hours when you've only played essentially 3 notes. And we enjoy that, as weird as it sounds.
You mentioned the possibility of playing to a silent video. One question, sort of going back a little bit, is the video that accompanies the audio of the EP. Talk a little bit about that.
It's kind of the opposite, wasn't it?
Yeah,
the video to the audio.
Yeah, it was the opposite. So basically, we'd had the EP finished, and this was when Liam came back from Japan, and we hadn't listened to anything for 6 months, and we sort of just put the EP on, and then we kind of had the realization that it was finished. We're like, oh, we've been waiting for so long, and now it's finished. We might as well put it out. So we had, because me and Liam have done a bunch of video work together as well in the past, doing multiple different projects, and we kind of were trying to think of the best way that we'd present the EP on, I guess, to the world, and we quite quickly just thought we wanted to do like a visual aspect to it. And then I guess it kind of comes down to ripping off other artists as well. But a band that influenced me heavily, I guess, with this new era of the band, the Cosmic Dead, and they had used an old silent film from, I think, 1902, which was an Alice in Wonderland film, and they just put that to their music as just their video clip to the song. And I think I just thought, I was like, oh, that's a really easy way of doing it. And so I just found a bunch of old films, and then when we were just playing the EP and watching the silent films, and it just kind of, it synced up in a kind of a frightening way that the music was really like kind of, I guess, a perfect like combination with the films that we were watching, and then so it just sort of seemed obvious then that we would compile a bunch of these old space films that were made anywhere from 1910 to 1930,
all pre-copyright law era.
Yeah, pretty much. And then we just made minimal cuts on them, but most of the cuts on the video are just naturally as they happen. And yeah, I don't know. I think it just was sort of a happy accident of taking an idea that someone else had already done and it actually working out really well.
And I think the most interesting part of that was once the footage, even just haphazardly, was placed against the music, the more we'd watch it over and over again, the more we'd find this synchronicity between the music and what was happening on screen, which was, I don't know, a very happy accident. And I'm not necessarily the most biggest believer in astrology or fate or serendipity, but it definitely seemed to line up weirdly just in parts and stuff like that. So that's what sort of spurred on the most recent iteration, is that if you can take the idea of the music and place a visual to it that seems to sync up without any real attempt at doing so, maybe we can do the same thing in reverse.
I guess it's a bit like the old putting Dark Side of the Moon on and watching Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. But backwards.
But backwards. Like, I think that's, yeah.
Listen to Dark Side of the Moon and see what visuals you can make up. That's it. It's kind of, that's what's happened there.
With tomorrow's show, it's tomorrow, isn't it?
It is tomorrow, yeah, at the Tote.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this episode won't be out by then, but I want to talk a little bit about it, because I think Nick is playing with you guys to make a fire piece for that show.
Yes.
How'd that come about, and how is that going to kind of affect the vibe of the show?
Well, this is kind of putting the cat out of the bag, isn't it? That Liam at some point in our future as a band will depart, and Nick is kind of like...
He was an original member, and that he was working on his own stuff. So he stepped out of the band when Liam stepped in. But even members of the band that no longer play with us have come back and played shows with us before. So we also had Matt. Yeah, Matt, who was also another original member. He'd come and played shows with us with Liam as well since he'd left. Nick had sort of come back in to sort of help us out, I guess, because Liam's going traveling, and then so he's not going to be around again. So he's going to be, like, I guess, leaving the band in a sense, though no one ever really leaves the band.
Everyone always comes back.
They always get roped back in. So Nick's stepping back in to sort of fill the void, and I think just because he's not so used to this new version of the band either, it's sort of just another experiment to have two guitars, both trying to improvise stuff and color it.
Yeah, it'll add another layer of colour on top of what we've already got going, and I think Nick's limited involvement recently is kind of another one of those elements of the excitement of the unknown, where we're going to go up on stage and do what we do, where we don't have any real rhyme structure or reason apart from 4 jams that we happen to have at the time, and then we'll just see what comes out with the addition of another person playing with a lot of delay pedals and twinkles as we go on. But it's not a planned thing, and there's no structure to it, but it's an exciting thing to do as well, especially at the Tote. It's a great venue to play around with.
And I think even for Nick as well, it's sort of an unknown thing for him as well, because it's different for him. In that, like, I guess just improvising live as well. So it'll be kind of uncomfortable and scary for him just as much as it is for us.
We're going to be shitting ourselves because we're not sure how it's going to turn out. But at the end of the gig, I'm pretty sure we'll be pretty happy with it. So.
Oh, that's really good. One last aspect of the music I want to talk about is I don't know if it'd be called a vocoder or a robot voice or something. But where does that come from? How did that get involved in your sound?
I think so, because we had a microcorg, a Korg microcorg, and when we were doing the vocals for Long,
the first track.
The first song on the EP, it was sort of just a idea as a layer amongst other vocals, which then ended up sounding so good that we were like, oh, actually, I think that is the vocal take that we were going to use. I think we were going to wash it out and layer lots of vocals. But then I also like how through a vocoder you can't really tell exactly what the lyrics are.
For us, it's kind of a way to add. For us, vocals have never been vocals on their own, so this is a way to add another layer to what we're doing without having to distinctly call it a vocal track. Most of the time, even now, I have no idea what Mathias sings when he sings it when we're playing songs, and that goes for anything we ever do. It never stays the same. It's essentially an extension of the synthesizer and samples for us. But yeah, I don't know. It's not so much a vocal anymore as much as it's part of the creating that wall of sound we're trying to go for.
I want to ask you guys a couple of questions of a more personal nature. When did you guys start playing, musical instruments, and why did you stick with it?
I think for me, it's just there's nothing else I can do.
Yeah.
As a cliche to say something like I feel like I was born to play music because it's all I think about. I can't think about anything else. As much as other things are important in life that you need to think about, I just can't put anything else in front of music, and it's just how my brain is.
I'm exactly the same, and I think that's quite telling for me and Matthias. And in terms of all of this stuff that's progressed over the years, Matt and I have kind of been this core unit of two people who just go, we're looking for people who want to come in and explore the musical realm with us because that's all we want to do. We'd love to not work and just do that. And I think it's not even a want, it's not a need, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
It's something that we have to do. We have to be creating music. We have to always be moving. And slowing down is probably the most depressing aspect of anything else when it comes to music creation for us. So you can have everything else going on in your life with work or jobs or relationships, but there's this unspoken constant drive to just play music. And I think that permeates for me and Matt and for a few others as well. And it's kind of why everything we've done, I guess, ends up being us two with some others thrown in. So, yeah.
In terms of like this sort of broad category of music you play, like what was it that got you into that?
I don't know. I think just I guess it's just for both of us, it's probably 20 plus years of playing music in lots of different styles.
Looking for things that excite you.
Yeah, and I think as I started off as a drummer, Nathan being a drummer as well. When you're younger and when you're the drummer of a band, you sort of just play whatever style of music people you find to play drums with want to make, and then you just sort of find avenues that kind of excite you a bit more. I mean, as me as a drummer, I've played in kind of like hardcore bands, punky bands, and then like indie pop bands.
Yeah, we've both done the cliches, the pop rock, the post punk, the prog bands. We've kind of done it all, and I guess this is as two drummers sitting in a room trying to write songs now, it's kind of trying to find the things that scare the shit out of us, to try and progress yourself further as a musician. Now, and I don't know. That's what this music to me, and I assume to Matthias as well, speaks to that part of you that goes, I'm terrified because I have no idea what I'm doing. And it's very easy to sort of rest on your laurels and stick with what you know. But I guess there's that drive, just coincidentally for the both of us, to try and find those spaces where we are completely uncomfortable and try and rock it out still.
And one last question. What have you been watching, listening to, reading recently?
I think for me, the last year or so, which I guess is kind of why the band's ended up the way we are now, is I've just been really stuck in that krautrock 70s, I guess, like bands like Noi or Can. I've just been really into that sort of stuff.
Noise experimentation.
Yeah. And then other bands nowadays that are like Foikazoid, a band from Chile that kind of make trance music, but with just like bass, drums, and guitar. So I think, like the band The Cosmic Dead that I mentioned before, just other bands that are sort of doing the same sort of thing where they're kind of just trying to create a vibe and I guess write it out.
There's also an element behind it. I don't know if I'm speaking just for myself, but of like listening to bands and watching things and reading things that push the envelope of something that might, at face value be a band, but when you hear it at the end of the day, it doesn't sound like a band. I don't know if that makes sense, but it sounds like a culmination of all these different things thrown together. But the exciting part about it is seeing a group of people do something and pull sounds and structures out that you wouldn't expect to ever hear. And that's what's exciting about the modern age with technology, is that we're able to take these age-old crafts of guitar and drums and bass and keyboards and turn them into something that sounds like, nothing you necessarily have heard before. So it's always a pursuit of pushing the envelope.
Yeah. I've also been watching a lot of Grand Designs, so I'm not sure if that translates or like gives me inspiration. But
I've been listening to a lot of soundtracks from horror movies, so I guess maybe that's got something to do with it.
That was Bug in the Mainframe by Laedj from their live show with Bear the Mammoth. Before that, we also had Laedj's song Monitor, an as yet unreleased song, also recorded at their live show with Bear the Mammoth. Thank you for Nathan and Mathias for talking to me. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate them sharing those live versions with me so I can include it in this podcast. It's something which is unreleased. I don't think they have any plans to release it, so I really appreciate them giving me the chance to share it with you. And I definitely look forward to chatting them later whenever they release some material which is kind of more reflective of the band they are now. That's going to be a really, really exciting chat. Thanks for listening to the show. If you've got any questions, comments, anything like that, you can send me an email, australianhunger@gmail.com. You can contact me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any of that jazz at Australian Hunger or Oz Hunger for Twitter in specific because of their character limit. But yeah, I'll hopefully see you later in the week. Bye.